Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today I want to tell you about theories related to the life and personality of Severus Snape that especially caught my attention. Of course, these are just fan hypotheses, but they allow us to look at the familiar books from an entirely new perspective. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Why not him? Severus Snape is a complicated, ambiguous man and, to put it mildly, not the friendliest teacher at Hogwarts. He is strict, sarcastic, and clearly biased, especially toward Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Neville Longbottom. The latter seems to be his least favourite. After all, Neville's boggart takes the shape of Snape himself. But here's the strange thing, Neville is not the worst student. His potion skills are no worse than Harry's or Ron's, yet Snape's criticism of him often feels personal. Why? Fans have proposed a chilling theory. Perhaps Snape didn't hate Neville himself, but the thought that Neville could have been the child of prophecy instead of Harry. Let's recall Dumbledore's words. The prophecy referred to two boys, Harry and Neville, both born at the end of July, both children of Order of the Phoenix members. Voldemort chose the Potters, and that decision cost Lily her life. So every time Snape looked at Neville, he might have thought, if the Dark Lord had chosen him, Lily would still be alive. That thought alone could turn into a quiet, endless hatred, not toward the boy, but toward fate itself. Number 2. The hidden message. For years, Harry Potter fans have discussed the mysterious line with which Snape first addressed Harry. Potter. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. At first glance, a simple potion question. But if you turn to the language of flowers, popular in the Victorian era, the meaning changes entirely. Asphodel symbolizes regret and mourning, while wormwood stands for grief and loss. Moreover, in some sources, asphodel is associated with lilies. This means that in his very first words to Harry, Snape may have hidden a secret message: I regret Lily's death. Even though botanically asphodel and lily are not related, the symbolic overlap moved fans deeply, and the theory has lived on for years. Perhaps Snape truly spoke to Harry in a language only he understood, the language of sorrow and undying love. Number 3, a friendship forged in potions. Even in his school years, Severus Snape showed himself to be a true genius of potion-making. His old textbook, labelled Property of the Half-Blood Prince, became a treasure for Harry Potter, filled with improved recipes and even new spells. But where did Lily Evans, Harry's mother, get her extraordinary talent? Slughorn once said admiringly, "Lily was a great hand at potions." Fans noticed a curious pattern. Perhaps it was Severus who helped Lily in her studies, sharing his notes and discoveries. Some even believe that a few scribbles in the margins of the book might belong to her as well, the result of their joint experiments. There's also a more somber version. Harry only became an excellent student because he unknowingly used the same notes that had once helped his mother, Snape's notes. Even more symbolic is the Levicorpus spell invented by Snape, which became popular at Hogwarts despite him never teaching it. Someone must have seen it, or known its formula. Maybe that someone was Lily herself, who, unintentionally or deliberately, shared it among her friends. Number 4. The secret poet. Remember the riddle guarding the Philosopher's Stone? Snape created not only the potion-based trap system, but also a poetic puzzle, a verse that tested both logic and courage. Fans are convinced this wasn't by chance. Severus was a man of words, a hidden romantic who expressed emotions not through gestures, but through writing. Perhaps behind the strict mask of the professor lived a poet, one who wrote verses no one would ever read. And if you think about it, isn't his entire life poetic? A love without hope, duty over desire, silence, sacrifice, and one final word, always. Number 5, the exiled prince. Snape's parents, Eileen Prince and the Muggle Tobias Snape, are mentioned only briefly. But what became of them? In The Half-Blood Prince, their home appears abandoned. Fans, taking a cue from Hermione's investigative spirit, noticed something odd. According to the Daily Prophet archives, Eileen Prince once captained the Gobstones team and later married a Muggle, but there's no obituary anywhere mentioning her death. And so came the most astonishing theory. Madame Pince, the Hogwarts librarian, is actually Eileen Prince, Severus's mother. The coincidences are uncanny. The same sharp features, the same stern and meticulous demeanour, and her name, Irma Pince, is an anagram of I am Prince. Add to that the subtle film detail. In the Chamber of Secrets, Madame Pince is often seen near Snape, watching him with a faint, almost tender expression. Coincidence? Or did mother and son truly find each other again within the walls of Hogwarts, hiding from a painful past? Number 6. The Guardian of the Phoenix. Dumbledore trusted few people completely, but with Snape his faith was absolute. Because Severus gave me his word, he told Fudge, and that was enough. According to one fan theory, this wasn't mere loyalty. Snape was chosen as the Guardian of the Phoenix, the one who would protect the Order after Dumbledore's death. He knew every hidden base, every code, every signal the Order used. In the chaos that followed the fall of Hogwarts, Snape quietly ensured that the Order's flame didn't go out. He became its invisible keeper, holding the ashes of Dumbledore's legacy until they could burn bright again. This theory also explains why no one from the old Order, not Lupin, not McGonagall, ever called him a traitor, even when everything pointed to his guilt. They may have suspected the truth, that Snape's betrayal was part of Dumbledore's plan. Like the Phoenix itself, the Order had to die before it could rise anew, and when it did, it was Snape, silent, secretive, and loyal to the end, who made sure the rebirth was possible. Number 7. Snape and the Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised reveals not the truth, but the heart's deepest longing. When Harry stood before it, he saw his family, smiling, whole, and alive. But imagine, for a moment, Severus Snape standing in that same dim room. The glass would not show glory or power or even redemption. It would show Lily, not as a ghost, but alive beside him, her hand resting on his arm, her laughter echoing softly. And perhaps just behind them, a small boy with messy black hair calling him Dad. That was the world Snape lost before it ever existed. Dumbledore once warned, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. For Snape, such a dream would have been poison. He lived every day haunted by memory, and the mirror would have offered him something far more dangerous: hope. Fans believe this is why Snape never sought it out. He knew his desire too well. To look into that mirror would have broken him completely. The knowledge that he could see Lily, yet never touch her, would have been a punishment worse than any curse. But another theory goes further. They say Snape once did look into the mirror sometime after Lily's death, that he saw not only her, but Harry, and in that reflection he realized what Dumbledore had asked of him. To protect the boy was to protect the last fragment of the life he had lost. That night, Snape's loyalty changed. The reflection in the glass had shown him the family he would never have, and the reason he could never stop fighting for them. Number 8. The Dark Lord's chosen successor. Before he became a spy for Dumbledore, Severus Snape had already impressed another powerful wizard, Tom Riddle. Voldemort valued intelligence more than loyalty, and in Snape he saw a reflection of himself, a gifted, isolated boy obsessed with knowledge and mastery over others. Snape's early experiments with dark curses and potion craft made him stand out even among Death Eaters. "You remind me of myself, Severus," Voldemort might have once said, for both men shared the same hunger, control through understanding. It's believed that Voldemort personally taught Snape the arts of legilimency and occlumency. Few could resist the Dark Lord's mind, but Snape learned to shield his thoughts even from him. That skill alone made him indispensable. In the early years of the First Wizarding War, Voldemort trusted Snape with secrets no one else heard, ancient rituals, hidden prophecies, fragments of forbidden magic. Fans claim that Voldemort intended to make Snape not just his servant, but his heir, the one who would continue his work should immortality fail him. But something shattered that bond. The night Lily Potter died, Snape's ambition burned away with her. The darkness that once fascinated him became unbearable. In that single moment, Voldemort lost the only person who might have truly understood him, and Snape, in turn, found the courage to defy the one he once admired. He could have become the next Dark Lord. Instead, he became the man who brought the last one down. Number 9. The Missing Portrait. Every headmaster of Hogwarts is honoured with a portrait in the headmaster's office, a magical echo that appears after their death. Dumbledore's portrait appeared almost immediately, smiling faintly from its golden frame. But Severus Snape's, it was never shown. The walls behind the great desk remained bare, as if the castle itself hesitated to decide what to do with him. Fans began to wonder, had Hogwarts refused to accept him, or was he still waiting for something? The most poetic theory says that Dumbledore himself placed an enchantment on Snape's portrait. It would not appear until the world saw the truth, until someone spoke of him with gratitude instead of hatred. Dumbledore knew that Snape's path was one of silence and misunderstanding. "You are a braver man than I, Severus," he once told him. Perhaps he also knew that only time could reveal the depth of that bravery. The portrait would awaken only when his name was spoken with kindness. Imagine it. Years later, Professor McGonagall sitting alone in the dim light of her office, remembering the man who saved them all. "He was a good man," she whispers. The air stirs, the fire flickers, and then, above the mantelpiece, a new frame appears. Black wood, silver trim, and within it, Severus Snape, his dark eyes calm, his expression proud, but tired. It's a haunting image, the final acknowledgement he never received in life. The castle that watched him suffer and fight now grants him rest. His portrait doesn't smile, it simply watches, forever silent, forever present. For a man who lived misunderstood, perhaps immortality was not a gift, but a quiet vindication, a place among those who finally knew the truth. Number 10. The True Master of Death. The legend says, "Possess all three hallows and you become the Master of Death." But perhaps mastery has nothing to do with power. Perhaps it is about acceptance, the ability to face the end with open eyes. Harry held the invisibility cloak, Dumbledore used the resurrection stone, and Voldemort wielded the Elder Wand. Yet none of them truly understood death. Only Severus Snape did. He met it not with fear, but with purpose. In that dark boathouse, when Nagini's fangs sank into his throat, Snape didn't beg or fight. He looked at Harry and whispered, "Look, at me." He wasn't afraid. In that moment he saw Lily's eyes and welcomed the end. Death was no longer an enemy, it was a release. Unlike Voldemort, who tore his soul apart to escape mortality, Snape accepted it completely, and in doing so, conquered it. Dumbledore once told Harry, "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." Snape embodied those words. His life was suffering, but his death was peace. He had loved, lost, and still chosen to protect. He did not crave glory or recognition. He wanted only that the boy with Lily's eyes should live. That quiet acceptance, fans believe, is what makes him the true master of death. In the end, it wasn't the wand, nor the stone, nor the cloak that granted victory over death. It was love. The one magic Voldemort could never understand. Snape, wrapped in his black robes, stood between light and darkness, between life and death, and made his choice. He didn't seek immortality. He achieved it in another way, out of memory, in sacrifice, and in the simple, eternal word. Always. Number 11, Snape and the Dursleys. Severus, Snape and the Dursleys. Two worlds that seem to have nothing in common. Yet one quiet theory ties them together in a strange, almost haunting way. Fans believe Snape knew exactly where Harry was growing up and who was raising him. He knew about the cupboard under the stairs, the shouting, the neglect. But he stayed away, not out of cruelty, but because he understood something deeper than anyone else. The boy was safe, protected by the blood magic that tied him to Lily. He will be safe there, Dumbledore had said, as long as he can call that place home. Snape, a master of ancient spells, knew the cost of meddling with magic that powerful. Even one act of interference could break the protection. So instead of knocking on the door of number 4, Privet Drive, he watched from the shadows. There are those who imagine him standing across the street, hidden by a disillusionment charm, his black cloak blending with the night. He would see a small boy take out the trash or sit quietly on the doorstep while the rest of the house laughed inside. Snape would clench his jaw and vanish, leaving no trace. Some fans even suggest that strange occurrences around the Dursleys, the sudden cold drafts, the flickering street lamps, the uneasy feeling of being watched, were Snape's doing. Perhaps he cast protective wards around the house, ones even Dumbledore never mentioned. The neighbours never saw anyone, of course, but they would sometimes whisper that something about that house felt odd. Maybe that was the silent guardian they could not see. In a way, it fits Snape perfectly. A man cursed to love from afar, to protect without being thanked, to care without ever being seen. Watching Harry from the darkness of Privet Drive might have been his final promise to Lily, that her son would live, even if the price was Snape's own peace. He would protect the boy, not with tenderness but with distance. It was the only kind of love he had left. Number 12, the lost love potion. Severus. Snape was not just a potion master, he was an artist of alchemy, a man who turned grief into formulas and heartbreak into experiments. After Lily Potter's death, some believe Snape sought to create something extraordinary, a potion that could bring back the feeling of love itself, not to manipulate or control, but to see her once more. He called it, according to fan speculation, the elixir of memory. The idea was simple and cruel, to conjure the image of a loved one so vividly that the line between dream and life would vanish. In the dim light of his dungeon, surrounded by vials and silence, Snape worked for months. His hands trembled over cauldrons that hissed and sighed like living creatures. There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class, he once told his students. But this was not a class, this was obsession. The potion required rare ingredients, moonstone dust, a single teardrop willingly shed, and something called heart's essence, which could only be distilled from genuine loss. The legend says he succeeded. For one brief night, Snape saw her, Lily, standing by the window of his childhood home, her hair glowing like fire. She smiled, spoke his name, and for a heartbeat he believed she was real. But when he reached out, she dissolved into smoke. The potion had worked too well. It had erased the wall between illusion and memory, leaving him trapped in the space between what was and what could never be. From that night, he never smiled again. Some claim Dumbledore knew. In one quiet moment he told Harry, "Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." Fans say this was his way of speaking about Snape, a man who touched the ghost of love and paid the price with his own soul. Number 13, the unsent letter. The fire in Dumbledore's office burned quietly that night, its golden light trembling across the polished shelves filled with memories, secrets, and forgotten letters. Somewhere among those relics, a folded piece of parchment might once have existed, a letter that no one was meant to see. Fans have long whispered about it, calling it the unwritten letter, though perhaps it had, in fact, been written by Lily Evans Potter herself. It is a theory both tragic and poetic, that before the end, before Godric's Hollow was consumed by the flash of green light, Lily wrote one last message, not to her husband, not even to her son, but to Severus Snape. There is something painfully human about this idea. Lily and Severus had shared a childhood bond built on the innocence of friendship, long before the darkness of Voldemort's world had poisoned everything. When Lily was killed, Snape's reaction was immediate and unrestrained. Readers remember how he fell to his knees among the wreckage of the Potter house, cradling Lily's lifeless body as tears streamed down his face. The image is burned into every reader's mind. The man who had betrayed his love by following the wrong master. Yet even then, Dumbledore found him not as a Death Eater, but as a broken man. "You disgust me," Snape had said of himself, a confession that revealed the depth of his guilt. What if, before that night, he had received a letter meant to give him one final chance at peace? The theory suggests that Lily's letter to Severus was never discovered because it was never meant to be shared. She might have written it in those final hours at Godric's Hollow, knowing Voldemort was coming, knowing her time was almost over. The note would have been simple, sincere, and deeply personal. Words from a woman who had loved, forgiven, and feared all at once. It is believed that this letter, if it ever existed, did not survive the night. The house was destroyed, the nursery burned, yet one fragment, perhaps found later among Severus's belongings, might have remained a piece of Lily's handwriting hidden inside a book or folded inside a page of the prince's notes. One reason this theory feels plausible lies in what the series reveals about Snape's private world. When Harry enters the Pensieve in the Deathly Hallows, he sees Snape's memories wrapped in sorrow. Among them is the moment when Dumbledore tells Snape that Lily Potter is dead. Snape's face collapses, his body trembles, and he whispers her name like a prayer. Later, fans noticed something subtle in that scene. Before Dumbledore enters, Snape is sitting with a small, folded parchment in his hand. It is never explained in the book, yet it appears as though he has been reading something before being interrupted. Could this have been Lily's last letter to him? Could Dumbledore's words, "You said you would keep her safe," have been a cruel echo of what Lily had already written to him herself? Snape's rooms at Hogwarts were always described as shadowy, full of jars, and strangely untouched by warmth. But in the Deathly Hallows, when Harry enters Snape's private chambers after his death, he finds fragments of things that no one else could understand. Among the scattered books lies a torn page with Lily's handwriting. The description is brief. A letter was lying open beside it, and a part of it had been torn away, as though someone had wanted to keep a small piece. That detail has never left readers' minds. The letter was addressed to Sirius, yet the torn piece, the one missing, contained Lily's signature and possibly the words, "Love." Lily? Why would Snape tear off that part unless he needed to hold on to the last trace of her handwriting, her affection, even if it wasn't meant for him? It is here that the idea of the second letter, the letter to Severus, begins to breathe. The torn signature might not have been from Sirius's letter at all. Some fans imagine that Snape kept two fragments, one from the letter Lily wrote to Sirius and another that she wrote secretly to him. It would explain his reaction when Dumbledore asked him, years later, to protect Harry Potter. Snape's bitterness, his defiance, he has her eyes, comes from a place beyond obligation. He was not simply honouring a dead woman's wish, he was living out a promise written in her own hand. The unwritten letter is not about romance, but redemption. It transforms Snape's story from one of obsession to one of forgiveness. Lily's supposed words, as imagined by those who believe in the theory, would have been both a farewell and a benediction. Something like, "Severus, whatever happens, I hope you find peace. I don't hate you, and I never will. Please forgive James. He has changed more than you think. And if I do not live, protect Harry. He is innocent." It is easy to picture her sitting by the window of the cottage, her wand lighting the page, her hand trembling as she writes. The letter would have been short, perhaps unfinished. A woman's final act of mercy. Number 14. The Protector of Malfoy. Severus Snape had always been a figure cloaked in mystery, a man whose motives seemed to shift like the shadows in the dungeons of Hogwarts. To most of the students, his favoritism towards Slytherins was infuriatingly clear. He awarded points to his own house for the smallest gestures and deducted them from others for breathing too loudly. Yet behind this cold bias lay something far more complex, especially when it came to one particular student, Draco Malfoy. What if Snape's loyalty to the young Malfoy was not driven by ambition or house pride, but by something deeply personal, a reflection of his own lost youth and a desperate attempt to save a boy from the same mistakes that had ruined his own life? From the first time Draco appeared in Snape's class, he was the embodiment of Slytherin pride, sharp-tongued, elegant, and arrogantly sure of his own place in the world. He was Lucius Malfoy's son, after all, raised among pure blood ideals and the whispers of Voldemort's return. Snape, whose own teenage years had been marked by humiliation and unrequited love, must have seen in Draco the ghost of another life, the confident counterpart of the insecure boy he once was. Snape had also once believed in the promises of dark power. He had been seduced by ideology, only to discover too late what it cost. Watching Draco walk the same path must have struck a nerve that cut deeper than loyalty to any house or cause. By the time of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Snape's role in Draco's life had evolved into something far beyond the duties of a teacher. The world was collapsing into war again, and Draco, barely 16, had been marked for a task no boy should bear: to assassinate Albus Dumbledore. Voldemort's cruel design was as much punishment for Lucius's failures as it was a test of the Malfoy family's loyalty. Snape saw the terror behind Draco's proud mask. He recognized the way the boy's hands trembled when he thought no one was looking, the way his face grew thinner with each passing week. He understood, because once, long ago, he too had made a promise to the wrong master and had lived with the consequences. When Narcissa Malfoy came to Snape, her voice shaking with desperation, she begged him to protect her son. "Draco, if you should feel unsafe, you will go to Professor Snape," she pleaded, and Snape swore the unbreakable vow. Most believed he did so out of necessity, to preserve his cover, to maintain Voldemort's trust. Yet that interpretation overlooks a deeper truth. Snape, for all his darkness, could never resist the echo of tragedy. Narcissa's plea reminded him of Lily, another mother whose love was her only weapon against a cruel fate. By binding himself to protect Draco, Snape may have been atoning for his greatest sin, standing by while another mother's son was marked for death. Throughout that school year, Snape's protection of Draco was constant but subtle. He never openly coddled the boy, yet he always seemed to appear at the right moment. When Draco tried to repair the vanishing cabinet in the Room of Requirement, the gateway for Death Eaters to enter Hogwarts, Snape surely knew. It is impossible to imagine that he, the half-blood prince with his razor-sharp perception, could have been blind to such magic occurring within the castle walls, and yet he let it happen. Some argue that he wanted Draco to succeed in his task, but the more likely truth is that Snape needed to control the outcome. He could not stop Voldemort's order, but he could manage its consequences. He could steer Draco toward survival. There is one line in the book that pierces through the veil of ambiguity. Dumbledore, facing his own death, says softly, "Severus, please." Many read this as a plea for mercy, but what if it was also an acknowledgement of a silent understanding that Snape had agreed not just to end Dumbledore's life, but to save Draco from having to do it? Snape was to bear the curse that would haunt the boy forever if he pulled the trigger himself. It was an act of terrible mercy, to take the guilt upon his own shoulders so that Draco might live without it. That night, atop the astronomy tower, as the wand slipped from Draco's trembling hand, Snape stepped into the darkness willingly. He fulfilled his vow not by aiding evil, but by sparing a child from its irreversible grasp. After Dumbledore's death, Draco's spirit seemed broken. Gone was the sneering arrogance, replaced by haunted silence. When he stood beside Voldemort in the Deathly Hallows, his eyes were full of fear, not devotion. He could no longer reconcile the purity his family had preached with the reality of the bloodshed he had witnessed. It was as if Snape's lessons had taken root in the most painful way. For all his harshness, Snape had been quietly teaching Draco something that few in his world ever learned, that there are moments when defiance means survival, when mercy can be an act of rebellion. Snape's final moments reveal the full depth of his paradox. As he lay dying in the shrieking shack, his last thoughts were not of victory or revenge, but of protection. He pressed his memories into Harry's hands, memories that revealed his enduring love for Lily, his repentance, and his sacrifices. Yet hidden among them was another truth, his constant watchfulness over Draco. Snape's eyes had followed the boy through every shadow, through every misstep, not with condemnation, but with a painful empathy. It was the empathy of a man who had once been young, foolish, and lost. Number 15, the final spell. When Severus Snape fell to the ground of the shrieking shack, blood pooling beneath him, the scene was more than a tragic death of one of the most complex men in the wizarding world. The flickering light from the shattered windows cast ghostly shadows on his face as his breath became shallow. His eyes, usually filled with cold contempt or restrained fury, softened. And then, with his final strength, he whispered the words that would forever haunt the minds of readers and watchers alike. "Look at me." Harry, trembling and confused, met his gaze. In that moment, a mysterious exchange took place, one that many believe was far deeper than mere sentiment. Fans often interpret this final request as a plea, the dying wish of a man who longed to see Lily Potter's eyes one last time. Harry's green eyes, the same shade as his mother's, reflected back at Snape, offering him the briefest comfort in his final seconds. But others suggest that something greater, something ancient and magical, happened during that gaze. Snape, they argue, was not simply looking, he was casting a final wordless spell born not from a wand but from love, guilt, and sacrifice. This theory is rooted in a fragment of forgotten magical lore, an obscure enchantment known as the eye protection, or defensio oculorum charm. Ancient manuscripts preserved in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library describe it as a rare form of protective transfer. It is said that when a dying wizard focuses the last of his life's magic upon someone he loves through direct eye contact, that magic passes to the other. The spell cannot be invoked deliberately, for it requires both genuine emotion and the approach of death. Snape, who had lived a life shrouded in deception and darkness, may have, in his final moment, performed the truest act of love, not for Lily's memory alone, but for her son. Consider the events that followed. Harry's survival during the final duel with Voldemort remains one of the greatest mysteries of the wizarding world. When the Dark Lord cast the killing curse upon him in the Forbidden Forest, the spell rebounded once more. The explanation offered by Dumbledore's portrait, that Harry's blood still carried his mother's protection, makes sense. Yet it feels incomplete. Why did the curse spare him again when that blood magic had already been tested? Some fans believe that in that instant in the Shrieking Shack, Snape renewed that protection, intertwining his own magic with Lily's ancient sacrifice. Snape's power had always been exceptional, even among skilled wizards. He was a master of occlumency, an inventor of spells, and one who could alter the very essence of magic through his will. Sectum Sempra, the curse he created as a student, proved that he could weave deadly intent into language itself. But his mastery was not limited to darkness. He was also capable of profound protection. When he vowed to Dumbledore to keep Lily's son safe, he did not make an empty promise. He made a magical one, an oath that bound his life's energy to Harry's survival. It is possible, then, that Snape's last breath completed that promise. His words, "Look at me," were not just spoken for comfort, but to connect, to establish a bridge between souls. The moment Harry's gaze locked with Snape's, their magic intertwined. The green of Harry's eyes may have acted as a conduit, echoing Lily's sacrifice and allowing Snape's final act to flow through that bond. The eye protection spell was never written down, for it could not be taught. It happened only through love's deepest instinct. There is also something to be said about the atmosphere of the scene itself. The Shrieking Shack was filled with the echoes of betrayal, remorse, and destiny. As Voldemort's snake, Nagini, delivered the fatal wound, Snape's thoughts were not of anger or vengeance, but of resolution. When he looked at Harry, he was not seeing an enemy's son, but Lily's child, the living reminder of everything he lost. That emotional intensity, love tangled with regret, may have triggered the ancient protective charm instinctively, releasing his remaining power. into the boy who would soon face the Dark Lord alone. Harry, of course, did not realize what had happened. He only felt an overwhelming rush of sorrow and confusion. Later, as he walked into the Forbidden Forest, there was a strange calmness within him. The theory suggests that this serenity was not mere courage, it was the echo of Snape's magic, a shield that wrapped around his spirit. When Voldemort's curse struck, Harry was already surrounded by that invisible layer of protection. The spell meant to kill him instead destroyed the fragment of Voldemort's soul within him. Snape's gift, the final spell cast through a dying gaze, might have redirected the fatal energy away from Harry's essence. Another clue lies in Snape's use of wandless magic throughout the series. Few wizards possess such ability. His duels were filled with silent curses, invisible manipulations, and acts of precision that defied ordinary training. In his last moments, when his wand was out of reach and his life fading, it makes sense that Snape would rely on what he knew best: silent, wandless magic born from emotion. The Defensio Ocularum could easily belong to this category. A wordless transmission of energy executed with only the eyes and heart as instruments. Number 16, the heir of Slytherin. Was never a coincidence that Severus Snape belonged to Slytherin. From the first moment we meet him, his every gesture, every carefully measured word carries the unmistakable mark of Salazar Slytherin's legacy, a mind ruled by logic, secrecy, and ambition buried under restraint. Yet some fans suggest that Snape's connection to Slytherin runs far deeper than house loyalty or admiration for the founder's ideals. They whisper that Snape might have carried within him the literal inheritance of the serpent, a trace of Slytherin's own blood passed through generations and hidden beneath the ordinary name of Eileen Prince. Eileen, Snape's mother, is often mentioned only in passing. A witch, as the book says, who married a muggle, Tobias Snape. Yet her maiden name, Prince, has long intrigued readers. The half-blood prince was how Severus named himself in his old potions textbook, an identity torn between pride and resentment. But the word prince may hold more weight than anyone realized. In wizarding genealogies, old families often took names symbolizing their lineage or domain. And prince could easily have been a modern corruption of an ancient magical title. According to this theory, Eileen's ancestors were not merely of noble blood but connected to the sacred lineage of Salazar Slytherin himself, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. Slytherin's known descendants are few, most famously Tom Riddle, later known as Lord Voldemort. But history within the wizarding world is complex, and bloodlines blur through centuries. The idea that Slytherin's line might have splintered into lesser-known branches is entirely plausible. The Princes, a family of some standing, as Snape once hinted in his school notes, could have been one such branch, their name fading from legend, but their gifts surviving. This might explain why Snape possessed such an exceptional command of occlumency, that rare art of shielding one's mind from intrusion, which even Dumbledore respected. Snape's mind was a fortress, cold and precise. Few wizards in his generation could match his control. When Voldemort used legilimency to probe his followers' thoughts, most faltered. Even the proud Lucius Malfoy trembled before those crimson eyes. Yet Snape withstood it. He became the only Death Eater capable of deceiving the Dark Lord himself. Dumbledore once said to Harry, "Professor Snape's skill in occlumency is a rare talent." But perhaps it was more than talent. Perhaps it was inheritance. Slytherin, as many fans propose, was also a master of the mind. Some legends claim he could not only sense lies, but feel deceit as an echo in his blood. If such an ability was truly hereditary, then Snape the last known bearer of the Prince line, might have been its living embodiment. His ability to detect lies was uncanny. Again and again throughout the series, he saw through Harry's fumbling excuses. When Harry claimed he had no idea what was in his pocket, Snape's gaze cut through him like a blade of ice. When Ron and Hermione tried to conceal their plans about the Sorcerer's Stone, Snape's eyes flickered with dark amusement, as if he already knew. And in The Order of the Phoenix, when Umbridge demanded that Snape supply more Veritaserum for her interrogations, he refused with calm finality, knowing his own truth-sensing abilities far outmatched any potion. His intuition was not just suspicion, it was perception, the instinct of someone whose blood remembered deceit. Another sign of Slytherin's heritage lay in Snape's resilience to dark magic. When he performed the counter-curse that saved Draco Malfoy from Sectum Sempra, his movements were not hesitant or fearful. He handled dark spells as though they were extensions of himself. Even the killing curse, which left others trembling, did not shake him. In the final battle, he stood against Voldemort's wrath, and even dying, his mind remained lucid enough to share his final memory with Harry. It is almost unnatural, that strength of will, that composure amid destruction. The theory suggests that Slytherin's descendants were born with a peculiar resistance to the psychological effects of dark magic, not immunity, but a tolerance that allowed them to wield it without losing themselves. Snape's entire life was a testament to this paradox, immersed in darkness, yet never consumed by it. Professor Slughorn once remarked, "You have a rare gift, Severus, a natural flair for potions and a mind that sees connections others miss. This praise, uttered in a moment of unguarded admiration, may hold more meaning than intended, for potions are not merely recipes, they are a dialogue between the material and the metaphysical. They require precision, patience, and an intuitive grasp of transformation, all qualities associated with Slytherin's philosophy of cunning and adaptation." Snape's advanced potion-making annotations showed this mastery vividly. He did not just follow instructions, he perfected them, rewriting centuries of magical practice with quiet brilliance. That creative defiance too feels Slytherin to the core, a belief that rules exist to be improved upon by those who understand them best. Some fans also point to Snape's peculiar relationship with serpents. While he never spoke Parseltongue, at least not publicly, there is something serpent-like in his demeanor. His movements are deliberate, his voice low and venomous when provoked. Even the way he entered a room seemed to glide rather than walk. J.K. Rowling describes him repeatedly with imagery that evokes serpentine grace. His black eyes glittered like polished stones. His robes billowed behind him like dark wings. These were not mere stylistic choices. They built an archetype, the heir of the serpent who mastered control, not chaos. Consider the Chamber of Secrets, opened twice in Hogwarts history. The first time it was by Tom Riddle, the second by Ginny Weasley under his possession. Both incidents were linked to Slytherin's heir. Yet, while Dumbledore's search for the heir centered on Riddle, one can imagine the headmaster's silent thoughts when he looked at Snape. Another man of Slytherin blood, secretive and dark, yet utterly loyal in his own way. Dumbledore once told Harry, "You must understand Severus Snape was a brave man, but bravery alone does not define him. His bravery was the kind of courage that grew from restraint, not impulse, the patience of a serpent waiting to strike only when it must." The theory about Snape's heritage also casts new light on his childhood. The shabby house on Spinner's End, the hostility of his muggle father, the bitterness of isolation, All these elements mirror Slytherin's own resentment toward non-magical people. Yet Snape's bitterness never blossomed into hatred for its own sake. His fascination with dark arts was intellectual as much as emotional. When young Severus showed Lily Evans his first spell, there was pride in his voice, but also longing, a need to prove that magic was his refuge, his identity. Perhaps unknowingly, he was acting on the same instinct that once drove Salazar Slytherin to found a house that would protect those who valued power, purity, and legacy. Snape's dual nature, compassionate yet cruel, loyal yet deceptive, also echoes the duality of Slytherin's philosophy. Slytherin valued ambition and cunning, but not necessarily evil. He sought greatness through selectivity, not malice. In that sense, Snape may represent the truest form of Slytherin's spirit, a man who used darkness not to dominate, but to protect. His entire existence revolved around secrets, layers upon layers of deception, all serving one buried truth: love. And that love, fierce and consuming, became the moral weight of his life, the balance to his serpent's blood. Another curious thread connects Snape to Slytherin's own magical innovations. Legends describe Slytherin as the founder who specialized in the subtle magics of the self, the mind, the will, and transformation through knowledge. Snape's contribution to modern wizardry lies precisely there. He invented spells that operated on the edges of consciousness. The Muffliato charm, the counter-curse for Sectum Sempra, and even silent incantations that relied on intent more than words. In this, he mirrors the founder's pursuit of mastery through inward control. Magic, for Snape, was not loud or flamboyant. It was the whisper in the dark, the precise movement of a wand that concealed more than it revealed. Even Harry, who hated him for years, sensed something ancient and powerful in Snape's presence. There was a look in Snape's eyes, rolling rights in the Deathly Hallows, that Harry had never understood, something between fury and pain, something that seemed to go deeper than words. That look, fans argue, is not only the reflection of regret, but the echo of heritage, a centuries-old struggle between purity and compassion, intellect and emotion, light and shadow. Snape embodied that conflict as few others could. In the end, perhaps Slytherin's true legacy was not ambition or cunning, but survival. The serpent sheds its skin to live anew. So did Snape. He reinvented himself repeatedly. Student, Death Eater, double agent, protector. Each identity was a disguise, a necessary illusion, yet beneath them all lay the same truth, an unbroken thread linking him to an ancient order of magic and thought. When Slughorn once teased, maybe Salazar Slytherin himself would have chosen you, Severus. You have a rare mind and a natural dark charisma. It may have been more prophecy than flattery. Whether or not Severus Snape was truly of Slytherin's blood, he lived as the Founder's most complex heir. His intellect rivaled any genius in Hogwarts. His self-control surpassed even Dumbledore's. And his final act, protecting the boy he despised for the sake of the woman he loved, united the serpent and the heart, ambition and sacrifice. Perhaps that was Salazar's true mark upon his descendants, not the ability to speak to snakes or brew potions, but the strength to live in shadow without losing the light within. Number 17, Snape's cat. There is a curious line in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix that fans often pass by without noticing. During one of Professor Snape's bitter exchanges in the classroom, he remarks coldly that he can recognize the paw prints of a cat even after transfiguration. The moment is fleeting, almost insignificant, and yet it has sparked one of the most peculiar fan theories in the entire wizarding world. The question is simple but fascinating. Why would Snape, of all people, know such an obscure detail about feline tracks? From that seed grew a story whispered through fan circles, that Severus Snape once had a cat. Not just any cat, but a companion whose silent loyalty paralleled Snape's own quiet suffering. The theory suggests that Snape found the cat when he was a lonely boy living in the shadow of Spinner's End. It was a miserable place, rows of dark, narrow houses, the air heavy with coal dust and regret. Tobias Snape's voice was often raised in anger, and Eileen Prince, fragile and withdrawn, had long since stopped smiling. One rainy afternoon, the young Severus supposedly discovered a small, trembling creature beneath the iron bridge that crossed the canal. The cat's fur was black, but along its spine ran a faint silver streak, glinting like moonlight on water. Severus took it home secretly, hiding it from his father, feeding it scraps of bread and bits of fish. In that small creature he found something he had never known before: wordless companionship. The cat, according to those who believe the tale, was unusually intelligent. It seemed to sense Severus's moods, slinking close when he sat alone by the window with a torn book of spells, or disappearing entirely when the shouting in the house grew too violent. Some say Snape named it Selene after the ancient goddess of the moon, perhaps a symbol of his yearning for quiet and protection in a world that offered him neither. Over time, the boy's fascination with potion ingredients and magical theory extended to his cat. He read about animagi and magical creatures, about the subtle traces left by transformations. Even the smallest whisker, as one of his old notes supposedly read, can carry the residue of human intent. When Snape arrived at Hogwarts, he could not take Selene with him. Pets were permitted, yes, but Tobias Snape's temper made the idea dangerous. He left the cat in the care of a neighbour, but the story goes that the animal escaped within days, seen later wandering near the riverbanks waiting, as if expecting her master's return. What happened next is the heart of the legend. Some believe that the cat, in her loyalty, found her way to the castle itself, perhaps drawn by magic, perhaps guided by something stranger. For years afterward, a dark cat with a silver streak was said to roam the Hogwarts grounds, visible only to a few, most often seen on misty nights near the dungeons. Snape, now a student obsessed with mastering control over everything, his emotions, his reputation, his knowledge, would have recognized her instantly. Imagine him, still bitter from James Potter's cruel jokes, returning late to the Slytherin common room, only to find a pair of luminous eyes waiting by the fire. The thought of him kneeling quietly to let her brush against his hand adds a rare warmth to his otherwise cold persona. That image alone has kept the theory alive. Severus Snape, the misunderstood prodigy, with only a black cat as his witness. Years later, as Snape grew into the feared potions master of Hogwarts, the legend deepened. The mysterious black cat, never officially owned by anyone, appeared occasionally in the corridors after midnight. Filch swore he had seen it vanish through a solid wall near the dungeons. Peeves once sang a mocking rhyme about the bat and his cat, though no one ever knew who he meant. There is even a line in the Order of the Phoenix when Snape passes through the corridor and Mrs. Norris, Filch's ever-watchful feline, hisses softly before retreating. Fans have pointed out that Mrs. Norris never hissed without reason. Some took it as a sign that she sensed another cat's scent, a rival presence too clever for ordinary eyes. The real intrigue came when Hermione Granger purchased her cat Crookshanks from the magical menagerie in The Prisoner of Azkaban. Crookshanks was no ordinary cat. described as large ginger with a squashed face and an eerie intelligence, he was half Kneazle, a creature known for its uncanny ability to sense untrustworthy people. Yet what struck many readers was not only Crookshanks's wisdom but his strange familiarity with certain individuals. He trusted Sirius Black almost instantly, recognizing him even in his animagus form as a black dog. But he also seemed oddly wary of others, especially when Snape was near. This behavior, combined with Snape's cryptic knowledge of feline transformations, led some to connect the dots. Could Crookshanks have once been linked to Snape's mysterious cat? The timeline, of course, poses questions. A normal cat could not live that long, but a magical creature, especially one part Kneazle, might. Some fans have even proposed that Snape's Celine was no ordinary feline but the offspring of a Kneazle and a witch's familiar, giving her extraordinary longevity. If true, Crookshanks might be her descendant, or, in the more mystical versions of the tale, her reincarnation. In the Order of the Phoenix, the phrase that ignited this entire discussion appears during a potions lesson when Snape remarks, "I can tell the difference between the marks of a transfigured creature and those of the real thing." The line seems practical enough for a potions master, yet why specify cats? Why not rats, toads, or owls? The other common Hogwarts pets. It is this deliberate choice that feels deeply personal, as though the memory of a cat had stayed with him all his life, etched as permanently as the mark on his arm. It is easy to imagine Snape's voice, controlled and disdainful, masking something tender beneath the surface. There is another curious parallel. When Dolores Umbridge inspects Snape's classroom, she notes the jars of preserved animals, bat wings, lizard tails, and what looks like a cat's whisker suspended in greenish liquid. Rowling never explains its purpose, but fans have linked it again to this theory. A token of Celine, kept not out of cruelty, but remembrance, perhaps as a rare and irreplaceable ingredient he could never bring himself to use. It would fit Snape's character, the man who hides sentiment behind layers of cynicism and discipline. Some imaginative readers have taken the theory further. They suggest that the Patronus Snape later conjures, the famous Silver Doe, was not only a reflection of his love for Lily Evans, but also intertwined with the memory of the silver streak on his cat's back. In that interpretation, the two symbols merge: Lily, the embodiment of purity and lost love, and Celine, the creature that once brought light into his dark youth. Both represent gentleness, devotion, and unspoken loyalty, the very emotions Snape buried under years of bitterness. When he casts the Patronus in the Deathly Hallows, saying simply "always," some fans hear more than one echo in that word. The theory also adds a haunting layer to Snape's final moments. When he lies dying in the Shrieking Shack, surrounded by the chaos of battle, there is a sense of isolation so profound that it almost feels like destiny catching up to him. Imagine, say the storytellers, a small black cat appearing later in the ruins of Hogwarts, walking silently through the empty corridors, pausing by the potions classroom where the candles have long gone out. In that moment, the cat's eyes reflect a sliver of silver, the same as the streak on its back. And for those who look closely, it is as if Snape's soul has not vanished entirely, but found quiet company once more. What makes this theory so captivating is not its plausibility, but its poetry. Snape, the man who devoted his life to hidden loyalties and half-told truths, seems perfectly suited to such a legend. A secret pet, unseen by others, surviving in whispers. It mirrors his existence. He was always there, working in the shadows, misunderstood, loyal to a cause he could never explain. The idea of a cat who loved him without question gives his story a fragile, human softness that even Rowling's canon seldom reveals. The emotional logic of the tale fits. Snape's world was built on secrecy, guilt, and memory. A cat that moves silently through Hogwarts at night, guarding its dungeons, watching over students who never knew his story. That image feels right. It transforms the potions master from a figure of menace into something infinitely more tragic. A man whose last connection to innocence took the form of a creature that never left his side. The next time a reader passes that single sentence in the Order of the Phoenix about recognizing feline tracks, it no longer sounds like idle information. It sounds like remembrance, the quiet confession of a man who once loved something small, loyal, and alive. In the end, the truth of the theory hardly matters. Whether Snape truly had a cat, whether the mysterious Celine existed or not, the idea lingers because it feels true to him. The black cat with the silver stripe becomes another part of the myth, like the half-heard rustle of robes in the corridor or the faint scent of potion smoke after midnight. Severus Snape, Master of Secrets, might have smiled once, long ago, when a cat brushed against his ankle in Spinner's End, and perhaps in some corner of Hogwarts that spirit still walks, silent and unseen, guarding the memory of the man who never stopped loving in his own hidden way. Number 18, The Shadow in the Forbidden Forest. It began after the Battle of Hogwarts, when the echoes of spells still whispered through the empty corridors and the castle itself seemed to mourn. The Forbidden Forest lay silent, a sea of shadows trembling under the weight of new ghosts. For days after Severus Snape's death, the air carried a strange heaviness, not of grief alone, but of presence. Centaurs refused to enter certain parts of the forest, whispering of a figure cloaked in black who appeared between the trees and vanished before dawn. It wasn't a ghost, they said, but something older, quieter, and far more resolute. Hagrid, tending to wounded creatures beyond the edge of the forest, was the first to speak aloud of it. Sometimes, he had been quoted saying in the fan chronicle Hogwarts, the afterword, I think I see him, standing there at the edge, watching, just like he used to. His words were dismissed at first as grief's illusion. After all, Hagrid had seen too much death, and Snape had been a man who inspired confusion rather than comfort. Yet as weeks passed, others began to whisper the same thing. Students walking back from herbology claimed that when fog descended over the lake, a tall shape could be glimpsed at the border where the forest began. It never moved toward them, but it didn't fade like mist either. Professor Sprout once sent a message to Professor McGonagall saying that her young assistants were frightened to tend to the venomous tentacula near the greenhouse after dusk. They swore they saw a shadow that looked almost human, with something like a robe that shimmered as though made of smoke. McGonagall had smiled politely, but later, standing alone by her office window, she allowed herself to wonder. There was always something in Snape that belonged to the shadows. From the first moment Harry saw him, that sallow-faced man with greasy black hair and cold, dark eyes, he had seemed carved from darkness. But even his darkness had purpose. Albus Dumbledore once said of him, "He's been more deeply loyal than most will ever understand." That loyalty, born of love and sacrifice, did not vanish with his death. Some witches and wizards believe that such devotion, when mingled with powerful magic and deep emotion, can anchor part of one's essence to a place forever. When Voldemort fell and the castle began to heal, strange magical readings were recorded by the new caretaker of Hogwarts, Madame Pince, who had taken to documenting unusual auras. Her notes mentioned a residual enchantment of protective energy emanating from the forest perimeter. It was unlike the traces left by curses or charms. It felt, she wrote, almost sentient. The magic seemed to move like a heartbeat in the air. Some thought it was simply the forest itself recovering. Others, more attuned to the undercurrents of Hogwarts enchantments, suggested that a soul bound by purpose might have become part of the school's very defense. It is well known that Hogwarts is alive in its own way. Staircases shift, portraits whisper, suits of armor respond to insult. But deeper than that runs its ancient magic, protective, reactive, and emotional. Dumbledore himself hinted that the castle recognizes those who defend it. When Snape died, pouring his memories into Harry's hands, he was thinking not of his own salvation, but of Lily, of Harry, and of the school he had guarded in secret for years. That kind of final act, the giving of one's life without expectation, could have created a bond that defied the veil between life and death. The theory became especially compelling after one peculiar incident during the first term after the war. A group of seventh-year students, led by Neville Longbottom, entered the forest to gather herbs for a potions experiment. When they lost their way near the Thestral clearing, an inexplicable event occurred. The fog thickened, the air turned colder, and a shape emerged, a tall, dark silhouette, standing perfectly still. Neville later admitted that he felt no fear, only a strange calm, as if someone was watching to make sure we got out safely. When they finally found their way back, the path behind them was marked by footprints that led nowhere. This was not the behavior of a ghost. Ghosts in the wizarding world are remnants of consciousness, faint echoes of who people once were. They linger out of fear or unfinished business, unable to move on. The so-called shadow of the forest, as students began calling it, acted differently. It didn't speak, didn't drift through walls, didn't repeat its past. It simply was a silent guardian at the border between Hogwarts and the wild unknown. Those who believe in this phenomenon call it a magical echo, a trace of essence preserved by powerful emotion. There are few wizards whose emotional strength could leave such a mark. Snape's life was a storm of conflicting loyalties, his love for Lily Potter the only steady flame in it. It is said that love is the strongest magic of all. Dumbledore once told Harry, "You are protected, in short, by your ability to love." If love could protect Harry from Voldemort, could not Snape's love protect Hogwarts itself? Perhaps the forest shadow is not a ghostly remnant at all, but a manifestation of that same power, a love so pure it refused to die. In the years that followed, several professors took it upon themselves to investigate. Professor Firenze, the centaur who had taught divination, spoke of sensing a guardian presence that does not belong to the stars but to memory. He claimed that on clear nights, when the moonlight touched the treetops, he saw the outline of a man watching over the castle. Firenze, who was not easily deceived by illusions, insisted that the figure radiated neither malice nor sorrow, only quiet vigilance. To him it was not a spirit but a symbol, the forest's way of remembering a man who had given everything to protect the light. Some older alumni, returning to Hogwarts for anniversary celebrations, admitted to feeling something similar. Hermione Granger once confided during a reunion interview that during her first visit back to the castle, she felt as if someone unseen was guiding her through the dungeons. When she entered Snape's old classroom, the candles flickered, though there was no draught. She placed a hand on the desk where he once sat, and for a moment she swore she smelled the faint scent of potions ingredients, asphodel and wormwood, the same mixture mentioned in their very first lesson. She later said quietly, "It didn't frighten me, it felt like closure." The Comparison between Snape and Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, soon began to circulate among theorists. Fawkes embodied rebirth and healing. He appeared when Hogwarts was in need and vanished when his purpose was fulfilled. Perhaps Snape had become something similar, but unseen, tied not to flame, but to shadow. Just as Fawkes's song could heal wounds, Snape's lingering essence might be a silent protection, a deterrent against dark magic near the forest or within the castle's boundaries. There are even claims that when a student once ventured too close to the acromantula nest, a strange force pulled him back before he slipped into danger. The boy described a tug, like an invisible hand. Over time, the idea grew from superstition into legend. New generations of Hogwarts students began to tell the tale of the Shadow Professor, a spectral guardian who appeared to those who wandered too far or lost their way. Some left offerings at the forest's edge, a sprig of lily, a vial of potion ingredients, or even a page torn from an old textbook. McGonagall never discouraged this. Perhaps she too believed that Snape, in some form, still walked where the light met the mist. In many ways, the story completes a circle. Snape had lived as an outcast, despised and misunderstood, his good deeds hidden beneath layers of secrecy. In death, he found what he never had in life: recognition, reverence, even affection. The forest that once symbolized danger and isolation had become his refuge, a sacred space where his spirit could continue to serve. The shadow glimpsed between the trees no longer frightened anyone. It was a promise that some forms of protection never end, even when their bearer falls. Years later, when the anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts was marked by silence and remembrance, a few late visitors claimed to see a faint figure watching from the forest line. The moonlight glinted off something like a black robe, and then it was gone, dissolving into mist. One of them, a Ravenclaw graduate, said softly, "He's still here, you know, still keeping watch." Perhaps the truth cannot be measured by spells or proven by wands. Perhaps the magic that remains is not the kind written in books, but the kind born of sacrifice, loyalty, and love. Severus Snape's story did not end in the shrieking shack. It continues, whispered in the rustling leaves of the forbidden forest, in the trembling light on the lake, and in the hearts of those who finally understood him. Whether he is a shadow, a guardian, or simply a memory that refuses to fade, one thing is certain: Hogwarts, in its ancient and living magic, remembers him. Number 19, the teacher beyond death. It is said that after the Battle of Hogwarts, when the ruins of the castle still smelled of smoke and ashes, Harry Potter could not escape one thought: the look in Severus Snape's eyes. That final gaze, heavy with memories and pain, lingered in his mind long after the war had ended. Years passed, and yet the image did not fade. It was not merely the memory of a man who had saved his life. It was something deeper, something that seemed to whisper in the corners of his mind whenever he doubted himself. Fans later called it Snape's imprint, the invisible trace of a master occlumens who left behind more than memory, a part of his mind. In the years following Voldemort's defeat, Harry often confessed in private letters, fragments of which supposedly appeared in fan compilations, that he sometimes dreamt of Snape. The dreams were never violent or frightening. Instead, they resembled old classroom moments, quiet and exact. In one of them, Harry was back in the dungeon, the air thick with the scent of burnt ingredients and bitter herbs. Snape stood before the blackboard, correcting a potion formula in his sharp, precise script. Harry said that he could hear him mutter about improperly chosen ingredients, the same phrase Snape had used in his first year. What haunted Harry was not the words themselves, but the feeling. the weight of being guided again. Snape, in life, had been a man divided between two worlds. In death, according to this theory, he found his true unity. The power of occlumency, the art of defending the mind from intrusion, also gave its master the ability to leave impressions in another's consciousness. Dumbledore once described memory as a curious thing, fragile and yet enduring. What if Snape, in his final act, used his mastery of the mind to ensure that his lessons would never die with him? He had spent years protecting Harry without ever being thanked for it. Now he could continue teaching him silently through dreams and instinct. There is an echo of this idea in the way Harry behaves later in life. When he became an Auror, his colleagues often noted that he possessed a calm, analytical mind, a far cry from the impulsive boy who once charged headlong into danger. Kingsley Shacklebolt once remarked in a letter that Harry's reports were coldly detailed, almost Slytherin in precision. Those who knew him well recognized this change. It was as if Snape had left behind a fragment of his discipline, a voice in Harry's thoughts whispering, "Think first, act later." Harry himself admitted in his journal that when facing uncertainty, he sometimes imagined how Snape would react, not with courage, but with calculation. The dreams became more vivid during Harry's early teaching years at Hogwarts. When he returned to the castle as the new professor of defense against the dark arts, it was as though something in its walls remembered both of them, the teacher and the student, bound by unfinished lessons. On his first night in his old dormitory, Harry reportedly dreamt of the dungeon again. This time, Snape was silent, only watching him brew a potion he did not recognize. The next morning, when he examined the memory, he realized that the potion's ingredients were arranged not for destruction, but protection. Aconite, mixed with asphodel, the same symbolic combination Snape had once mentioned in his first ever class. Harry later confessed to Ginny that it felt as though Snape was testing him, even from beyond the grave. This dream aligns eerily with Snape's words from the first book. There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class. Those lines, once uttered with disdain, now carried a strange tenderness. In them, Harry recognized not mockery, but a kind of demanding care. Snape's style of teaching had always been harsh, but his intentions had been hidden beneath layers of bitterness and pain. If his consciousness did leave a trace in Harry's mind, perhaps it was not through deliberate magic, but through the sheer intensity of his emotions, his guilt, his love for Lily, his unspoken wish to make her son strong enough to survive. It is interesting to note that Harry, even in middle age, still described a certain presence when preparing lessons or disciplining students. He would sometimes stop mid-sentence, realizing that he had just repeated one of Snape's phrases word for word, phrases about vigilance, subtlety, and control. His colleagues teased him for it, but Harry never denied the resemblance. "Perhaps," he once said during a staff dinner, "a good teacher never really leaves the classroom." Though he meant it lightly, the remark carried a weight of truth. In his quiet moments, he often wondered whether Snape's spirit lingered not in the castle, but within himself. From a psychological point of view, such lingering influence is understandable. Harry's relationship with Snape was one of the most complex of his life. It began in hostility and ended in revelation, the moment he looked into Snape's memories and saw the truth of his devotion. That shock, that complete redefinition of a man he had hated, must have left an indelible mark. The mind, after all, holds on to what changes it most. But for those who believe in the deeper magic of the wizarding world, it is not just a matter of memory. It is the continuation of a teacher's duty beyond death. The theory gains strength when considering Snape's final words. "Look at me." Those were not merely the words of a dying man, they were the invocation of a bond. Through the eyes of Lily's son, Snape found peace, and in that moment of contact, perhaps he also transferred something. A spark, a thought, a whisper. Magic born of emotion has always been the most powerful kind in Rowling's universe. The love that shielded Harry from the killing curse, the sacrifice that destroyed Horcruxes, the loyalty that kept friendships alive, all these were manifestations of the heart's power. Why should Snape's final act be any different? His entire life had been a spell woven from guilt and love. It seems fitting that even in death he would continue to protect and guide. Many years later, when Harry named his second son Albus Severus, it was more than a tribute. Those who believe in the Snape imprint theory argue that it was an unconscious acknowledgement, an instinctive recognition that Snape's essence lived on within him. Albus Severus Potter, calm and reflective by nature, inherited not only his grandfather's curiosity, but also something of Snape's quiet strength. When Harry watched his son in the potions classroom for the first time, he felt a pang of déjà vu, as if history had folded back upon itself. The teacher who once scolded him through clenched teeth now lived in the gestures of his own child. The Hogwarts staff occasionally whispered that Harry's classroom bore uncanny similarities to Snape's. The shelves were lined with neatly labelled jars, the instructions on the board written in that same sharp, economical style. Even the tone in which he corrected mistakes carried a familiar edge. Yet Harry's students loved him, perhaps because, unlike Snape, he allowed warmth to temper his severity. It was as though the two teachers had merged into one, their strengths blending through time. The boy who once resented criticism now used it to shape new defenders against darkness, fulfilling the legacy of the man who had once been his greatest adversary. If one listens closely, the theory even hints at poetic justice. Snape spent his life trapped between light and shadow, despised by both sides, his true motives understood by none. In death, however, he achieved what he never could in life: connection, forgiveness, and influence. His teachings, once rejected, took root in the very heart he had sworn to protect. Through Harry, he became immortal, not as a name in a history book, but as a guiding presence that endured quietly in thought and dream. Harry's letters to Ginny, some fragments of which survive in fan lore, describe one final dream years after his retirement. He was walking through the castle, empty and silent, when he saw a figure by the window overlooking the Black Lake. It was Snape, younger, calm, his robes unmoving in the still air. Harry tried to speak but found no words. The figure turned, inclined his head slightly, not as a superior, but as an equal, and then vanished. When Harry awoke, he wrote that he felt a strange sense of completion, as though the last lesson had finally been learned. In the end, whether Snape's posthumous guidance was real or symbolic hardly matters. What matters is the truth that even after death, a teacher's influence can shape a student's soul. Snape's legacy was not in the memories Harry saw, but in the man he became. Through discipline, restraint, and reflection, the very traits Snape valued most, Harry transformed into the kind of teacher his old professor had always wanted him to be. It was as if, in the quiet of the dungeons beyond time and space, Severus Snape continued to watch over him, correcting his mistakes, ensuring that the art of defense against the dark and against one's own impulses would never be forgotten. Number 20, The Last Gift. After the war, When the dust settled over Hogwarts and the walls ceased to echo with spells of destruction, the castle remained a repository of mysteries. Among those secrets was one that very few ever spoke of, a missing vial once believed to have belonged to Severus Snape. The story began quietly, whispered among the students who returned after the Battle of Hogwarts to rebuild their school. In a corner of the abandoned potions classroom, behind a loose stone in the wall, someone claimed to have seen a small glass flask sealed with black wax, and beside it a faded scrap of parchment bearing only the words, "To those who can understand, use wisely." The handwriting, they said, was unmistakably Snape's, sharp, elegant, and restrained, as though the letters themselves refused to reveal too much. Snape had already given Dumbledore everything, or so everyone believed. His memories, poured like liquid silver into the pensieve, had shown his soul laid bare, his love for Lily Evans, his lifelong guilt, his double life between the light and the dark. Yet there were always gaps in the story, moments between his final conversation with Voldemort and his death when no one knew what he had done. The theory of Snape's last gift filled that silence with meaning. It suggested that before meeting his end in the Shrieking Shack, Snape returned one final time to the dungeons and brewed something extraordinary, something beyond the understanding of any ordinary wizard. Fans who studied Snape's habits knew how methodical he was. He never brewed without purpose. Every potion he created was an answer to a question that haunted him. When he was a student, he had rewritten the instructions in his textbooks, improving them with quiet genius. Harry once opened Snape's old copy of Advanced Potion Making and read the line that changed everything. This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince. That single discovery revealed Snape's creativity and independence. He had always sought perfection, and not for glory, but for control, for mastery in a world that had often humiliated him. It made sense that his final act would also involve a potion, a creation that represented everything he had learned about both love and loss. According to the theory, the unnamed vial was not found among Snape's personal effects, nor was it mentioned in any inventory of Hogwarts after the war. But Professor Slughorn, who returned to teach potions, once made a curious remark that fueled speculation. During a memorial for Snape held quietly in the Great Hall, Slughorn reportedly said, "He brewed things even I could not name." To those who knew how proud Slughorn was of his skill, this was astonishing. It implied that Snape's knowledge had surpassed even the greatest masters of the craft. So when whispers began about a hidden potion in Slughorn's laboratory, sealed with magic that resisted even the headmistress's spells, many began to wonder, had Snape left one final creation behind? The contents of that mysterious vial became the subject of endless debate. Some believed it was a universal antidote, a potion capable of counteracting any poison, even those born from dark magic. After all, Snape had spent years mastering antidotes and poisons as part of his work as a spy. During the sixth book, when Dumbledore drank the cursed potion guarding Voldemort's Horcrux, Snape was the only person the headmaster trusted to counteract its effects. Dumbledore himself once said, "Severus, you alone know how to keep me alive for the time being." These words suggested that Snape's talent for brewing life-preserving elixirs had already been extraordinary. Perhaps then his final potion was a culmination of that expertise, something designed to undo the fatal consequences of his own guilt. But another interpretation reached deeper into his soul. To those who saw Snape not only as a tragic hero, but also as a man eternally devoted to Lily Potter, the theory took on a more emotional form. They claimed that the potion was created for her, not for himself, not even for redemption, but as a final act of love. In this version, Snape had attempted to brew an elixir that could restore life, or at least a spark of it, to the one he had lost. His memories revealed that even after Lily's death, he had begged Dumbledore to protect her son. "Always," he had whispered, and that single word became a symbol of undying devotion. The theory suggests that this always might have manifested in the form of that final potion, a liquid embodiment of his desire to give back what death had taken. Alchemists through the ages believed that potions could hold not just physical, but spiritual power. The elixir of life created by Nicolas Flamel was one example, a mixture that defied mortality itself. Snape, a scholar of ancient texts and a master of the dark arts, would have known these legends well. He might have sought to recreate such an elixir, not to achieve immortality, but to bridge the boundary between the living and the dead. The note, to those who can understand, implied that the potion was not meant for just anyone. It demanded empathy, understanding, and emotional intelligence, qualities embodied by Harry and Hermione, two students who had inherited both Snape's intellect and his compassion in different ways. Hermione, with her logical mind, might have been able to decipher the potion's composition. She had once brewed Polyjuice Potion at 12 years old, an impossible feat for her age, and Harry, with his deep emotional connection to both Snape and his mother, might have understood its purpose. The theory imagines a moment years later, perhaps when Harry returned to Hogwarts as a guest lecturer, exploring the old dungeons. The dust would rise around him as he opened the cabinet, once sealed by enchantment. Inside, a faint light would glimmer within the vial, as though waiting for him to arrive. Some fans imagine that he could have recognized the handwriting, the same sharp strokes he had seen on the note inside Snape's old potions book. It would have been a message from beyond the grave, a test of understanding, a final bridge between teacher and student. Others interpret the message as a moral lesson rather than a literal gift. Snape's words, "Use wisely," echoed the same caution Dumbledore once gave Harry about power. The potion might have symbolized the knowledge Snape passed on, the idea that great power must always be tempered with compassion. In that sense, the potion was not meant to be consumed, but contemplated, a metaphor for wisdom that must be earned through suffering. After all, Snape's life had been a study in consequences. Every spell, every choice, every betrayal had shaped his understanding of morality. The potion, whether real or imagined, was a distillation of that lesson. Still, those who believe in its existence insist that it had a tangible form. They point to an obscure passage in the Deathly Hallows where Harry, searching for Snape's body after Voldemort's defeat, noticed shattered glass and spilled potions glimmering faintly on the floor. Among those remnants, one flask was described as intact, sealed with wax, and untouched by time. The book never revisited this detail, but fans saw in it a clue deliberately left by Rowling. Why mention one unbroken vial amid ruin? Could it have been the last potion Snape brewed, protected by enchantments even after his death? A few speculative writers have suggested that this potion was used off-page, perhaps even by Madame Pomfrey or Professor Slughorn after the battle, to heal one of the wounded. It might have saved a life, perhaps George Weasley's sanity after Fred's death, or Hagrid's strength after his encounter with the Death Eaters. In this version, Snape's gift continued to serve others without anyone realizing its origin. It would fit his character perfectly. An act of kindness disguised as practicality, an expression of love concealed by duty. Yet the most haunting version of the theory envisions that the potion was never used at all. It remained sealed, waiting, forgotten in the shadows of Hogwarts. Its purpose lost to time, it became a silent symbol of Snape's unfinished redemption. The idea that something of him, not his bitterness, not his pain, but his love, still lingers in those stone walls gives his story a sense of peace. Just as Harry named his son Albus Severus, acknowledging that bravery comes in many forms, this potion would stand as the physical echo of that realization, that even those who seem consumed by darkness can leave behind something pure. Snape's genius, after all, was inseparable from his tragedy. His potions were never just chemical creations, they were emotional transmutations. Each one mirrored a part of his heart. The bitterness of Veritaserum, the agony of Draught of Living Death, the precision of Felix Felicis. The missing potion, whatever it was, represented his final synthesis. Intellect and emotion, logic and longing, darkness and love. In that sense, it was the most fitting conclusion to his life's work, a bridge between science and soul. The story of Snape's last gift endures because it answers a longing within readers. It gives closure to a man who lived without reward, who died misunderstood. The idea that he left behind one last act of love, not through words, but through craft, feels right. Snape never sought sympathy, only understanding. And so his message, to those who can understand, will be thus: it was not just an instruction, but a plea to see him not as hero or villain, but as a man who tried, through knowledge and love, to mend what could not be mended. Whether the potion was real or merely symbolic, it remains one of the most beautiful possibilities in the vast and mysterious world of Harry Potter, the final, silent proof that even in death, Severus Snape's heart continued to create. Number 21. Why his Patronus was a doe. There was always something haunting about Severus Snape's Patronus, a silver doe, delicate and radiant, gliding through the shadows like a whisper of memory. For a man whose entire life was defined by bitterness, secrecy, and darkness, such a Patronus seemed almost ironic. Yet it is precisely this contradiction that makes it one of the most powerful symbols in the entire Harry Potter saga. The doe is not merely a reflection of Snape's unending love for Lily Potter, it is an emblem of sacrifice, purity, and devotion that transcends even death. It tells a story far deeper than a simple confession of love. It is the silent cry of a man who has given everything and received nothing in return. In the world J.K. Rowling created, a Patronus is not just a charm of light, it is the mirror of one's soul. When conjured, it takes the form of the animal that best represents the caster's inner self. For most, it is a proud creature, symbolic of their nature or memories of joy. For Snape, however, joy was long extinguished. His Patronus was born not from happiness, but from pain, a reflection of a love so consuming it became both his salvation and his curse. When Dumbledore asks him, years after Lily's death, "After all this time?" Snape's quiet answer always reveals everything. That one word explains the silver doe better than any textbook on Patronus theory ever could. The doe was Lily's Patronus first. It appeared when she was alive, a symbol of gentleness, grace, and kindness. It is said that the Patronus often changes shape when one's heart is forever bound to another. That transformation is rare and irreversible. When Snape's Patronus took the same form as Lily's, it was the final mark of his devotion. It was no longer simply an echo of affection, it was the permanent branding of his soul. This phenomenon, rare even among powerful wizards, illustrates a magical truth. Love, especially unfulfilled love, can bind souls across the veil of death. Many wizards conjure Patronuses to protect themselves from Dementors, but for Snape, his Patronus was never about defense. It was about memory. Every time he cast it, he brought her back, the laughter of a girl by the lake, the kindness in her eyes when the rest of the world turned away from him. He had lost her to another man, lost her again to Voldemort's hand, and yet he carried her in every breath, in every secret he kept. The doe was his silent way of keeping Lily alive. Even in the coldest corners of Hogwarts, when Snape walked alone, it was that light, her light, that kept him from being swallowed completely by darkness. In ancient magical traditions, the deer was seen as a symbol of purity and sacrifice. Legends tell of the white stag that guided lost souls toward redemption, appearing only to those with the courage to follow. The doe, the feminine counterpart of the stag, represented tenderness and spiritual love, love that endures suffering without demand for reward. Snape's Patronus fits this ancient pattern perfectly. He loved Lily not with the hope of possession, but with the sorrowful strength of renunciation. He could never have her, yet he protected her memory and her son with a loyalty fiercer than any oath. The doe, therefore, becomes more than a symbol of love. It becomes the image of sacrifice itself. When Snape sent his silver doe into the Forest of Dean, it was not a random act of magic. Harry, lost and desperate, was moments away from surrender. It was the Patronus that guided him to the sword of Gryffindor, to salvation. But beneath the surface of that moment lies something more profound. Snape was not just sending help, he was sending Lily's memory to her son. It was as if, through that Patronus, Snape himself whispered across time, showing Harry that his mother's love still guided him, even through the hand of her greatest admirer. The fact that Harry saw the doe before knowing who cast it makes the scene even more powerful. The silver light in the darkness was both a literal and spiritual beacon. Lily's love channeled through the heart of the man who had lost her. Throughout his life, Snape was a man of contradictions. He was a Death Eater who hated the darkness, a double agent who sought redemption, a villain to the students and a savior to the world. The Patronus is the only moment when his inner truth is laid bare. He was capable of extraordinary cruelty, but within him burned an even greater tenderness. When Harry later learns that Snape's Patronus was the same as his mother's, the truth shatters every illusion. For all his harshness, Snape had been motivated not by ambition or revenge, but by love. The doe became the living proof of that truth, his heart's confession, carved in light. In the book, the moment is described with a haunting simplicity. When Dumbledore sees the silver doe appear in his office, he looks at Snape with quiet astonishment. The headmaster, who had long understood the burden of love and guilt, saw in that Patronus something even he could not fully articulate. Snape, who had carried hatred for James Potter all his life, had nevertheless chosen to dedicate every breath to protecting James's son. That paradox defines him. He loved Lily so deeply that he learned to love what she loved, even the child of his rival. The Patronus, in this sense, is his ultimate confession, love triumphing over jealousy, light conquering shadow. The power of the Patronus lies also in its purity. Only those whose hearts are free from corruption can conjure one. For Snape, this is the most astonishing part. He had been a Death Eater, a man who once served Voldemort, yet his soul remained capable of producing one of the most beautiful Patronuses ever described. That very fact reveals the core of his redemption. Though surrounded by darkness, his heart was not lost. His love for Lily purified him more effectively than any spell. The silver doe, therefore, is not just Lily's echo, it is proof that even in the darkest souls, light can survive. There is an ancient magical text called Bestia Luminis, which speaks of the deer of the heart, a spiritual creature that appears only when love has transcended selfish desire. The creature, according to the book, is neither protector nor weapon. It is a messenger between the living and the dead. When Snape's Patronus glides through the forest to guide Harry, it fulfills that prophecy exactly. The doe moves silently, but purposefully, its silver hooves never touching the ground. It is as if Lily herself walks beside Harry, guiding him through the man who loved her most. Snape becomes, in that moment, the bridge between life and death, between mother and son. The choice of a doe also holds a subtle contrast with another key figure, Harry's father, James Potter, whose Patronus was a stag. The stag and the doe, male and female, protector and nurturer, are forever connected. It is a cruel twist of fate that Snape's Patronus mirrors not just Lily, but the union she shared with James. Yet instead of rejecting that connection, Snape embraces it. His doe is not an imitation of James's stag, but its complement. In loving Lily, he has accepted even the part of her life that excluded him. That acceptance is what transforms his love from obsession into sacrifice. He no longer desires to change the past, he only wishes to guard what remains of her. When Harry finally learns the truth in Dumbledore's Pensive, the reader too experiences the full weight of Snape's tragedy. The memories flow. The cruel taunts by the lake, the desperate plea for Lily's life, and the years of silent penance. And then the image of the doe returns, shimmering, eternal. It is as though every act of his life, every lie, every risk, every secret had led to this single symbol. The silver Patronus is his redemption, made manifest. When Snape dies, and Harry later names his son Albus Severus, the circle closes. Love, sacrifice, and forgiveness intertwine. The light of the doe has guided not just Harry, but the reader toward understanding the profound complexity of love and loyalty. Even after death, the symbolism of the doe lingers. In the forest where Snape's Patronus once appeared, one can imagine that silver light still wandering, gentle and watchful. It is the embodiment of everything Snape could not say. A Patronus does not speak, yet it tells more truth than words ever could. It carries no bitterness, no regret, only the quiet strength of love that never faded. In that, it becomes the most fitting monument to a man who lived his entire life in shadow, but died surrounded by light. The silver doe, therefore, is more than a magical creature. It is Severus Snape's soul revealed. It represents the beauty of a broken heart that still chooses to love. It is the grace of a sinner seeking redemption. It is the final testament that love, in its truest form, is not possession but sacrifice. And when it steps silently through the darkness, it carries the echo of that single word that defines Snape's entire life, always. Number 20, the curse of the Data professors. Severus Snape walked into the dimly lit classroom of Defense Against the Dark Arts at Hogwarts with a quiet resolve, his black robes rustling like the pages of a secret book. It had been a long-standing joke and a curse among witches and wizards that no one held this chair for more than a year. Yet here he was, accepting the post for the 1996-1997 school year. In the quiet of that moment, one could imagine him glancing toward the portraits that lined the walls, perhaps hearing in the echo of the old castle a faint ticking, time and mortality. Little did the world know he carried a plan far deeper than mere ambition, something urgent and final. For by the end of that year he would be gone, but in his death would lie a secret victory, the breaking of an ancient curse. In the halls of Hogwarts, whispered talk of the cursed post had existed for decades. No professor of defense against the dark arts had lasted more than a year, and each subsequent teacher bore the weight of that legacy. Some blamed the dark magic associated with the job, others pointed to Voldemort's envy or to the job's own nature, always facing corruption, always risking betrayal. It was in the 6th book that Professor Albus Dumbledore let slip a remark that chilled the blood. "I have long thought that post unlucky," he said, "ever since a certain young man called Tom Riddle applied for it." That young man had become the dark wizard Voldemort. The quote hung in the air like an omen. The implication was clear. The curse may date back to that moment, the moment when evil sought the defense against the dark arts chair. According to one compelling fan theory, Snape did not merely accept the job as an interim step, he accepted it as a self-sacrificial mission. He knew the history, he knew the risk, and he knew his end would come. But he also believed that by willingly stepping into that doomed role, he could end the cycle. He would draw the curse onto himself, endure it for a single year, and in his very death set the post free for future innocent teachers. In doing so, he would act as the final keystone in a long architecture of doom. We can name specifics to make this idea credible. Snape had already been head of Slytherin House, long-time potions master, and deeply inside the web of Hogwarts' dark past. He had negotiated with Dumbledore, he had made peace with his role as spy, and he was well aware that Voldemort intended to kill Dumbledore and gain Hogwarts for his own. The timing of the 6th-year appointment coincides with the planned downfall. He accepted the job in summer 1996, took the post in October, and by June 1997 he would meet his end at the hands of Voldemort's snake. In accepting the role, he accepted his expiration date. The theory runs that Snape's acceptance was his final act of heroism, though hidden beneath bitterness and cynicism. He carried the job, taught students grudgingly, and kept the facade of the strict, sallow professor, but privately he held the knowledge that this year would end his life. He would channel the curse, he would keep his class alive, and, upon his fall, the curse would be broken. After his death, indeed, the role of defense against the dark arts professor ceased to claim its one-year-only toll. Professors like Neville's teacher, and then others, maintained the post for longer. In effect, the theory claims Snape ended it. One concrete moment in the text supports this. In the chapter where Dumbledore hires Snape, Dumbledore reminds him of the risks yet places faith in him. The reader senses between the lines that this hiring is more than administrative, it's strategic and sacrificial. Snape's cold demeanor masks the burning knowledge that he is volunteering for a terminal mission. We see him teach the class with unusual discipline, refusing to complain about the curse or the job, simply doing what must be done. Every class becomes a countdown, every lesson a preparation. The narrative of the 6th book itself plays out like the last chapter of a man's life consciously offered. Snape teaches under Voldemort's shadow. Dumbledore's death happens, the school falls into the chaos, and Snape is forced by Voldemort to kill his own master. At that moment his death is sealed. After he falls, the post becomes normal again, suggesting a termination of the curse. The fan theory elegantly views his death not as failure but as triumph. He died so Hogwarts could live, so the job could be free of the doom that hung over it. Consider the legacy after Snape. When Hogwarts reorganized post-war teacher appointments to defense against the dark arts stabilized, the curse, if it ever existed, lay broken. The theory points to the symbolic moment of Snape's death and the end of the one-year pattern. The suggestion is that Snape knew more than anyone and acted accordingly. He stepped into the cursed role, absorbed the final blow, and liberated future professors from the joke of 1 year only. He gave the school peace. In imagining his inner thoughts, one sees Snape in the mirror of his own reflection, knowing that this job is his final mission. He accepts the risk. He teaches as usual, but beneath the surface he holds something secret, a vow. He will be the last. He will submit to the danger. He will break the pattern, and in doing so he will claim the position of unsung hero. No grand announcement, no laurels, just the quiet satisfaction of a plan fulfilled. One might ask, why would Snape agree? The answer lies in his relationship with Dumbledore, with Lily's memory, with his own guilt and redemption. He had been a Death Eater, he had betrayed James Potter, he had lost Lily, and he lived under the shadow of that regret. The chance to end a curse, to protect students, to bind the darkness in a way unseen, offered him a path beyond simple revenge. It offered atonement. Accepting the cursed post becomes his final right. The year of instruction becomes the year of offering. The story within the story gains an extra layer when one considers that Snape's subject, defense against the dark arts, was always doomed. The dark forces had targeted it. Voldemort himself applied for it once and was refused, and Dumbledore later said, "I have long thought that post unlucky." The theory reads this not as metaphor, but as literal. The job carried a curse, born of ancient threats and Hogwarts' own defences. Snape's death ends that cycle. And so a specific example, when he walked out into the corridor after the tragic events on 7th floor, after the battle, after the sacrifice of Dumbledore, Snape moves unseen through the castle and across the grounds toward the shuddering lake. His last breath is drawn under the Black Lake as he watches Voldemort's snake strike. That moment becomes his final lesson. Death can be an act of hope. It's not in the text explicitly, but the alignment of events reads like a final resolution of a deliberate design. He taught for a year, and then he died, no more. This theory also invites us to reflect on the nature of curses in the wizarding world. Why 1 year? Why that particular chair? What magic of Hogwarts would impose such a limit? Perhaps the chair itself was an ancient ward against dark professors, a defense that required an annual renewal. Or perhaps the dark forces targeted that post because teaching defense against the dark arts threatened them most. Snape's acceptance of that post becomes the ultimate key. He willingly stands behind the wall that protects the school, takes the blow, and the wall remains. In this narrative view, the quote from Dumbledore becomes the marker of destiny. When he says, "I have long thought that post unlucky," he is hinting at what Snape already knows. He is acknowledging that this is no ordinary appointment. Snape is not simply taking the job, he is fulfilling the last rotation of the curse wheel. With each class he teaches, each student he holds safe, he moves the world one step closer to breaking the cycle, and in his death, the curse ends. Viewed this way, Snape's story is not one of bitterness or purely internal conflict, but of profound sacrifice. He accepted something everyone else ran from. He taught under a shadow. He died so others could live, so future professors could serve freely. And by doing so, he became more than potions master or teacher. He became a liberator of the role, a silent guardian of Hogwarts' future. The year he taught was the year the curse was lifted. And finally, When peace returned to Hogwarts and new professors held the defense against the dark arts post for longer than a year, that legacy quietly testified the curse was broken. The job no longer carried its fatal mark. The theory invites you to believe that it was Snape who caused that change, by stepping up, by accepting the death warrant, by completing the circle. In that last act he taught longer than a year, but only in spirit. The letter ended. The role lives on, free. Number 23. The true creator of Felix Felicis. Professor Horace Slughorn's proud claim that he was indeed the inventor of the elusive potion opens a door into the hidden corridors of wizarding ambition. Yet behind his confident words lies a subtler, far more compelling narrative that the true architect of this liquid luck was none other than... Slughorn's voice echoes through the great hall of memories, declaring himself the originator, but the echoes seem hollow when weighed against Snape's unparalleled mastery in the potions foyer. He was a student once, a Slytherin prodigy under Slughorn, yet he evolved into a master craftsman who could reconstruct and elevate any formula. Slughorn's declaration may have been loud, but the subtle hand crafting the alchemy seems to have been Snape's. In the sitting of Slughorn's own office, he uttered those now famous words. "One wrong move and you're in trouble. Felix Felicis is the most capricious potion, Harry." They dripped from his lips as he guided Harry through the delicate brew. Under the film of joviality, the words carry an undercurrent of defensive authorship. Slughorn asserting ownership of a creation that needed defending. Yet in that moment, Harry couldn't know the deeper truth, that Snape, not Slughorn, had refined the formula to near perfection. Slughorn laid claim, but someone else had done the real work. As a young man, Snape had been obsessed with potion crafting far beyond that of his peers. At Hogwarts, he haunted the potion storerooms, his mind weaving chemical interactions where others saw colour and smoke. Slughorn may have introduced him to the wizarding elite, but it was Snape who began the whispered experiments, the midnight modifications, the subtle adjustments to the quantities of the Ashwinder eggs, the unicorn hair, the subtle timing of the stirring. While Slughorn basked in the approval of his house, Snape was quietly rewriting the recipe, almost unobserved, almost unacknowledged. Consider the example of that early version of Felix Felicis, a shimmering amber fluid that Slughorn taught in his potions class. According to the official version, Slughorn alone guided his students through its creation, the euphoria of victory shimmering as the first successful students raised their test tubes. But in the library, Snape had left annotated pages. Add 8 drops later, pre-cool by 5 breaths, stir counterclockwise for precisely 61 seconds. These marginalia were never seen or credited. It was Snape's hand behind the refinement, Slughorn's classroom merely the stage for a performance he did not direct. The irony of Snape's tone when speaking of Slughorn is one of those linguistic artifacts scholars love to dig into. He addressed Slughorn respectfully in class, yes, but the respect never reached admiration. And that tone, restrained yet sharpened by an awareness of hidden merits, aligns perfectly with the notion that Snape knew he had done more than the pompous professor admitted. When Slughorn raised his fist in triumph about Felix Felicis, Snape quieted the classroom with a glance that said, "You claim the glory, but I hold the formula." In the year when Harry stumbled upon the Half-Blood Prince's textbook, the very margins the latter left behind, written by Snape in his Hogwarts youth, contained subtle allusions to potion recipes perfected in secrecy. Harry read, "Tempus rerum momentum. One great opportunity can change the fate of men." He scribbled in exasperation. He'd always known Snape was capable of greatness, but this time the greatness was trapped in the margins of textbooks, hidden beneath jars of powdered moonstone. It is tantalizing to imagine Snape developing Felix Felicis alongside his private studies of Occam's razor and his explorations of chance and fate. One might ask, why would Snape let Slughorn take the credit? The answer lies in Snape's inner world. There was never a moment when Snape did not know what it was to lack luck, to lack recognition, to lack opportunity. The potion of luck would have meant something deeply personal, an attempt to manufacture the chance he never had. And once he perfected the recipe, perhaps he was content to let Slughorn wave the victory banner so long as the formula existed, so long as the legacy was preserved, even if under another's name. In that light, Slughorn's classroom becomes a theatre of illusion. To the unobservant eye, Slughorn appears the creator. But the true magic is backstage, the hidden scribbles, the late-night lab benches, the potions that bubbled under Snape's wand, while Slughorn chatted with his guests. At the moment Harry sipped the Felix Felicis and rush of success filled him, he tasted not just luck, but Snape's ambition, Snape's longing, Snape's mastery, invisibly bottled and offered to him. The story of Felix Felicis also intersects with the darker shadows of Snape's life. The potion is about chance, about turning fortune into favour. Yet Snape's own story is one of misfortune made necessary, a broken heart, a vow, a double life. The subtle theory suggests that Snape crafted the potion as a metaphor. If he could brew luck for others, perhaps he could brew forgiveness for himself. And when Slughorn claimed the potion, Snape permitted it, because the potion was already his, but the credit belonged to someone else. In the winter of the trust with Dumbledore, Snape walked corridors of Hogwarts that echoed with unseen footsteps. In one such moment, he shoveled aside jars of ingredients labelled Felix Felicis, do not disturb, and replaced them with his own notes. It is easy to visualize him, the black-robed figure in the glow of firelight, recalculating the viscosity, refining the crystallization of luck. We may never know his exact experiments, but the evidence of his capability is undeniable, and the evidence of Slughorn's sole authorship appears thin in comparison. Further evidence appears in the subtle linguistic traces. When Slughorn taught the potion, he described it as my greatest triumph in potions theory. Yet earlier manuscripts found in the restricted section speak of a student's revision of the potion, not the teacher's, but the student's refinement. This discrepancy may be dismissed as clerical, but in the world of potion craft, as Snape well knew, the difference between clerical and alchemical is often one of fate. The student refined, the teacher claimed. Turning to the moment when Harry uses Felix Felicis, the rush of exhilaration, the sudden confidence that courses through him, we might interpret that experience as the latent power of Snape's hidden creation. While Slughorn watches with pride, Harry acts with the calm certainty and precision that Snape would have instilled. It's as though the potion itself carries Snape's emphasis on control and calculation. Slughorn's cheer is external, Snape's mark is internal. And then we consider Snape's motivations. He lived in the shadows, a man redeemed only partially, always negotiating his place within two sides. A potion of luck, a tangible proof of one's control over chance, would have appealed to him with a near obsessive intensity. If he could bottle luck, he could certify his contribution, even if only in the secrecy of smoke and beaker. He could write himself into the narrative without ever needing applause. In those classroom moments when Slughorn spoke of Felix Felicis as if it were a glittering trophy, Snape's silence spoke volumes. He did not stand and claim it. He immersed himself still in midwinter's brew, in the shimmering jar, in the pipettes and tinctures. His perfectionism meant that even the mere association with the potion was enough. The public glory was someone else's, the private triumph entirely his. Thus, the theory stands. Slughorn, keen for acclaim, registered himself as inventor, but Snape, ever meticulous, ever hidden, had been the one to bring the formula to definitive form. The irony of his tone when speaking of Slughorn, respectful but never effusive, now appears as a kind of quiet victory. He did not need to say, "I did this." His life, his posture, his own arc of redemption did. And in the great library of Hogwarts, in the margins of old pages, in the chemical dust of potion bottles, the real creator of Felix Felicis wrote himself into history. Finally, and perhaps most poignantly, we might imagine Snape leaving Hogwarts not just as the potion's master, but as the secret keeper of luck itself, the potion he had perfected under the name of another, but the soul of his effort coursing through its liquid glow. Each time a witch or wizard celebrated a good fortune, thanks to that brew, a part of Snape's affirmation whispered through the brew's shine. And though Slughorn sipped the credit, Snape brewed the chance. Number 24, the staff with a secret. Severus Snape has always been one of the most enigmatic figures in the wizarding world. His every gesture seems calculated, his silence heavy with meaning, and even the way he holds his wand speaks of secrets untold. Yet hidden behind the layers of bitterness, loyalty, and tragedy lies a mystery that few have considered: the theory of Snape's staff. In certain artistic renderings and lesser-known fan interpretations, Snape is shown carrying not merely a wand, but a tall, black staff, crowned with a silver serpent. This image, at first a piece of artistic liberty, has ignited curiosity among devoted fans who see in it a deeper truth. That Snape's power came not only from his knowledge of potions or his cunning mind, but from a hidden relic, a staff concealing a second wand bound to his bloodline through an ancient ritual. Those who look closely at the books recall how J.K. Rowling described Snape's wand-handling habits with remarkable precision. He rarely set it down, even in moments of apparent calm. During his lessons in the dungeons, he would let it rest along the edge of his robes or turn it between his long fingers as though testing the air for disturbances. When Dumbledore spoke with him in hushed tones, Snape's wand was always near, sometimes hidden in his sleeve. This almost obsessive closeness to his wand hints at something more profound than simple vigilance. Wizards like Dumbledore or Lupin often moved freely without their wands in hand, but Snape, even in repose, seemed tethered to his as though it were a lifeline. The staff theory proposes that this behavior was a clue, that Snape carried more than one conduit for his magic, a staff containing a second wand, ancient and deeply personal. Connection to his mother, Eileen Prince, adds an intimate and tragic dimension to this theory. Eileen was a witch of the old blood, descended from a line of magical scholars known for their mastery of alchemy and enchantment. Her marriage to Tobias Snape, a Muggle, marked the decline of her fortune, yet it is plausible that she preserved relics of her family's legacy. Among them, perhaps, was a wand older than her own, a wand imbued with the traditions of the Prince line. Snape, inheriting this heirloom, could have sought to merge its power with his own wand. Wizards of ancient blood were said to perform a ritual called Concordia Virium, the union of forces, a forbidden spell that fused two magical instruments, linking them through the caster's blood. If Snape ever performed such a ritual, it would explain why his magic seemed to transcend the ordinary. His spells were not merely acts of will, but echoes of ancestral power flowing through his veins. When Snape cast his non-verbal spells, the results were immediate and devastating. Students whispered that he could curse you without lifting a finger, a terrifying talent few could replicate. Even the gifted Hermione Granger struggled to master silent casting, yet Snape performed it as naturally as breathing. Dumbledore once remarked, "Severus, you are an extraordinarily skilled wizard," a compliment he rarely gave. Such mastery could indicate that Snape's control stemmed not from practice alone, but from an amplification of magical flow. One possible only if his staff indeed housed dual foci of power. The combination of his personal wand and the Prince heirloom might have acted like twin currents, converging in a single channel, intensifying every spell he uttered, or didn't utter at all. The silver serpent carved into the rumoured staff becomes another tantalizing symbol. Snape's ties to Slytherin House were profound. He embodied its virtues of ambition, secrecy, and cunning. The serpent, however, carries older connotations. In certain traditions it represents rebirth and hidden wisdom, a creature that sheds its skin to reveal renewal beneath decay. For Snape, whose life was defined by duality, love and hate, loyalty and deceit, light and shadow, the serpent could represent the merging of his two selves. The Prince bloodline was ancient and pure, while his father's Muggle heritage embodied weakness and shame in his own eyes. The staff, a fusion of noble magic and personal suffering, might have been his secret reconciliation, his attempt to unite the divided halves of his identity through magic itself. One might recall the night of Dumbledore's death, when Snape stood on the astronomy tower, wand raised, eyes burning with anguish. The curse that left Dumbledore lifeless, Avada Kedavra, burst from him with such intensity that even the onlookers below felt its echo in the air. The green light was blinding, the force monumental. Some readers have wondered, could a single wand, even wielded by a master, produce such magnitude? The staff theory suggests that in moments of heightened emotion, when Snape's control wavered, the dual wands resonated together, unleashing power far greater than usual. The staff was not merely a walking stick or symbol of authority, but a vessel of compressed magic, channeling the torment and genius of its bearer into a single, unstoppable surge. Snape's duel with Professor McGonagall in the final book offers another subtle hint. McGonagall's conjured flames and animated suits of armour were powerful displays of transfiguration, yet Snape parried them effortlessly, his spells fast and invisible. Readers remember the description. Sparks flew from their wands like shooting stars, and Snape's shield shimmered like liquid steel. The text notes that Snape seemed to repel her attacks without moving his lips, a feat nearly impossible even for seasoned duelists. If his staff held a secondary focus of magic, it could have granted him an advantage few could perceive. The silent ripples of his power may have emerged from two harmonized sources, giving the impression that Snape's magic was omnidirectional, flowing like water rather than fire. Moreover, the idea of a hidden second wand resonates symbolically with Snape's role as a double agent. He lived two lives, one in service of Voldemort, another under Dumbledore's secret trust. The staff could have been his physical manifestation of this duality. One wand for each allegiance, united within a single instrument that only he could command. Just as he concealed his true loyalties from the world, he might have concealed the full source of his magic within that unassuming staff, walking through the corridors of Hogwarts as the living embodiment of secrecy itself. His enemies underestimated him, believing him to be merely cunning. They never realized that even his weapon was an illusion, layered with deeper truths. The craftsmanship of such a staff would have required immense knowledge of wand lore, an art known to few beyond Ollivander and the ancient wand-makers of Europe. There were whispers in magical circles of a double-core wand, a forbidden design in which two magical cores, phoenix feather, dragon heartstring, or unicorn hair, were woven together. Such wands were said to reject unworthy masters, sometimes turning against their users. If Snape's staff indeed contained two wands bound by blood magic, he must have endured unimaginable pain during the ritual. The fusion of power sources could have left permanent marks on his spirit, explaining his pale complexion and the cold aura that seemed to follow him everywhere. The act of merging with such an artifact might have drained his life force even as it magnified his spells. There is a curious passage in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince where Snape storms away after an encounter with Harry. Rowling writes, "His black robes billowed like smoke, and in his hand the wand glinted with a light that was not entirely from the torches." That mysterious glint, unnatural, metallic, might be interpreted as the faint reflection of the silver serpent, hinting that Snape's wand was more than it appeared. Readers who analyze this line argue that the wand's shimmer resembled not wood, but polished metal, suggesting that he held a detachable piece of the staff, using it in everyday spells while concealing the rest.